Hello, everybody. Welcome and welcome back to Pilates Teacher's Manual, your guide to becoming a great Pilates teacher. I'm Olivia. You'll get the latest updates when you join my community at buymeacoffee.com/Olivia Podcast or follow along on Instagram at Pilates Teacher's Manual. Pilates Teacher's Manual, the book, is available now. You can purchase it and other podcast merch at shop.oliviabioni.com. You can also purchase my book on Amazon, but it is more expensive. However, if you buy the EPUB or PDF file from me, you can convert that file into a Kindle-friendly format by going to amazon.com, send to Kindle. So it is less expensive as if you purchase it directly from me. I do recommend using an EPUB file if you do that conversion because that keeps the formatting the most. Another exciting announcement is that I am hosting my workshop called Creating an Inclusive Class for Prenatal Clients, live and virtual in November. It's on November 15th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. I've linked to it in the show notes so that you can check your time zone and register. This workshop includes a 50-minute prenatal-friendly mat Pilates masterclass, where you use your mat and probably a bolster or a pillow or a wedge if you'd like. And I will teach you a prenatal-friendly class. And it's a masterclass because I'm also talking to you as a teacher as you are doing the movements. I'm talking a little bit more about the why I'm making the choices I'm making and giving you a little bit of theory behind it. So we'll do that class for 50 minutes. Then there's a 2-hour presentation on best practices for programming and working with prenatal and postpartum friends with lots of time for Q&A for all of your questions. I'm also including that MAT program that I am teaching you and a prenatal friendly equipment program that uses the reformer and some other equipment. This workshop is designed to help you gain confidence working with prenatal and postpartum clients, to feel what those prenatal modifications for exercises really feel like in your own body, and understand the why behind modifying our Pilates exercises, as well as how to modify them. You can earn 3 National Pilates Certification Program continuing ed credits if you attend the workshop live, but you can also view the recording of the workshop for up to 2 weeks following the date of the workshop. So that is what is new and hip-hop happening with me. Today's episode is all about layering exercises or building exercises up, that's another way of saying it, for our clients' success. This idea of building up our exercises can be applied to working with clients one-on-one or working with clients in group classes. Everything. Anytime you're teaching movement to someone, this applies. The core idea is that teaching in this way, where you start with an easier variation of an exercise and then layer up or add variations to it, to harder variations as you teach, will help your clients be more successful in the exercises that you teach. There's a bit of context behind this idea. It comes from a research paper that's been really formative to my teaching and the way I teach about optimal theory, which is an article that I've talked about and I've linked in the show notes. I will link it again. Pilates exercises are just a specific series of movements, and one of the principal ways that people learn movement best, as discussed in this research paper, is by having what's called an enhanced expectancy of success. That means that when they succeed early on, they believe that they will succeed again, and they are more willing to do a harder thing because they experienced that success early on. So that's one piece of context. Another piece of context is the theory of mind that I've shared with you before, which is the idea that every Pilates exercise exists on a spectrum, with easier and simpler versions of the exercise on one side of the spectrum, getting progressively more and more challenging and complex to the other side of that spectrum. Now, that model is 2-dimensional, which is easier to visualize, but the full model that I think about actually has way more axes because there's more than one dimension of difficulty. which will probably be the subject of my next book. But for now, you can see that easier things exist on the left. The Pilates exercise as you know it in your manual is right in the middle, and then things that are harder than the Pilates exercise are on the right. And not like that it's a different exercise, but it would be like if we look at shoulder bridge on the mat, for example, like an easier version of shoulder bridge would be both feet on the ground and arms by your sides instead of hands on your hips. And then it gets progressively more challenging. You start lifting a leg, then you start straightening that lifted leg. Then you've got the exercise shoulder bridge right in the middle, right? Hands on the hips. Leg is long and you're lowering and lifting it. But then also it gets harder than that. Like what if you had an ankle weight? What if you were doing your shoulder bridge on a Bosu? Or if you were on the reformer and the spring tension was really light and you had to work really hard to keep the carriage closed. Like it's the same exercise of shoulder bridge, but on a spectrum of challenges. This way of teaching that I'm describing is not the type of class where it's just like do the 100, do the roll up, do the rollover, etc. Like there are styles of classes and places where it's appropriate, where you're working with people who are executing the exercises and there aren't a bunch of variations or options given. They're doing, their version of the exercise to the best of their ability, and they're just executing the choreography as seen in Return to Life or in your manual. But what I'm sharing here is that layering before and then potentially beyond each exercise that you teach acts as a roadmap to your clients. When you have the space to do that, it will guide your clients to better get into the exercise and to be more successful achieving those exercises. Now, the way that we build up, or the way that sometimes I'll call it dialing up and dialing down an exercise, is we have these variables that we can play with as Pilates teachers. We can play with the equipment settings, we can play with load, we can play with the complexity, the base of support, and the range of motion. We can start every exercise simpler than the exercise that you're aiming for. Like say you're teaching plank. You can start simpler than a full plank by adjusting these variables. Bridging on the reformer, for example, is easier when there's more supportive equipment settings, like heavier springs to stop the carriage from moving out, a ball between the knees to help keep the thighs parallel. It's also easier with less load on our muscles, so bridging with bent legs instead of straight legs, for example, like a semicircle variation, or on a single leg also. Less complexity is also easier, so maybe a hinge bridge instead of an articulated bridge, or maybe you aren't adding in any arm choreography or hand weights. You're focusing on the fundamentals of the bridge will be easier. The base of support is how much of us is in contact with the equipment. So bridging with our arms down is widening our base of support. A smaller range of movement will also make it easier, so maybe feet on the platform instead of feet on the foot bar, or changing the range in the bridge in terms of only lifting the hips a few inches instead of all the way into that diagonal line. If we change those variables to less supportive equipment settings, like lighter springs or without the ball between the knees, with toes on the foot bar or subtracting one leg, by incorporating arm choreography or maybe a tempo change or lifting the arms to narrow the base of support, or raising the foot bar to increase the range of motion, that same exercise of bridging on the reformer can get a lot more challenging. Naturally, you don't have to or potentially even want to adjust every single variable in every single exercise that you teach, because it would really break up the flow of class to do that. But you can certainly work with changing one or two variables within the exercise to start smaller, build up, and then offer even increased challenges beyond the exercise. So that's the theory, but what does it look like in practice? For an example, here's how I might cue bridging in one of my Reformer Flow 1 classes at Club Pilates. All right, team, we're going into bridging. Please lower your headrest if it's lifted. Today we're starting with feet hip width distance apart on the gray sandpaper platform under the foot bar, arms long by your side. First up is a hinge bridge. With your exhalation, lift your hips to a diagonal line, spine in one piece like a plank of wood. Find that line, knees, hips, shoulders. Inhale to slowly lower the hips to the carriage. That carriage stays glued to the bumper. How is that feeling in your hamstrings, the backs of your thighs, and your glutes today? If it feels like that's what you need today, stay here, exhaling to lift the hips, inhaling to lower. If you've got some extra gas in the tank, take your arches to the foot bar. The game is the same. Exhale to hinge bridge in that diagonal line, inhale to lower the hips. If you've still got some gas, option to add on. Could you walk your toes to the foot bar and continue to hinge bridge on your toes? If you notice the carriage begins to move, dial back that foot placement or find more work in the hamstrings to pull the carriage into the bumper. Next time the hips lift, can you keep them lifted? Hips stay lifted, continue to breathe. Wherever your feet are, option to lift your arms to the ceiling. Next, exhale, lower them back to the carriage. Hips are lifted, inhale, lift the arms to ceiling. Exhale, arms back to the carriage. That is totally optional, no requirement to do that. Now we decide, do you want your arms to stay up or on the carriage? Whichever you choose, arms stay there. Option to continue to hold that bridge, arms where they are, continue to breathe, or pulse those hips 1 inch higher, 1 inch lower, 1 inch up, 1 inch down. Pulsing for 3, 2, 1. Lower the hips, lower the arms, let that go. In that example, the variables I played with were load and range of motion because lifting our hips with our feet on that gray sandpaper platform is less load and range of movement than on the arches or the toes on the foot bar. I played with base of support because we had the option to raise our arms or keep them down, and complexity because I added some pulses and some arm choreography there at the end. I didn't stop the class to change the height of the foot bar or change the spring settings, and I didn't have them grab a prop or anything like that. But depending on what else is happening in your class, those could also be fun variables to play with. A personal pet peeve of mine is when I'm taking a class and a teacher says, do this, and if you can't do that, do this. The person who can't do the first exercise that's described already feels like they failed. In my bridging example, I started everyone on the platform. Everyone feels successful. Bridging with feet on the platform is easier. And whether the person chooses to progress or chooses to stay at that first version, they get to keep moving and working the whole time. They're not waiting for a modification on the exercise that they can't do. They also have the option to try the next thing, and if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, they already have the modification. It's exactly what they were doing before, and they feel really confident doing that. The artistry here comes from where you choose to start and end the exercise on your spectrum. So in an intermediate or an advanced class, for example, I wouldn't start with feet on the platform, but the first bridge variation I cued would likely start with 2 feet before I did a 1 foot variation. Or it would start with static arms before I added in arm choreography. Everyone wins when you start an exercise a little bit lower on the scale. Friends who might be in your class and maybe they're struggling with the exercise, when you start with that really simple layer, they get to develop a skill before you add on to it. Friends who are already really strong and are totally capable of doing the full exercise or even taking it a little bit further also get to practice the fundamentals, which is so important. As an instructor, when you're programming a class, if you only teach one version of the exercise, you have to program a ton more exercises. Whereas if you think of each exercise as having multiple layers, maybe 3 to 5 layers, the exercise gets really fleshed out. It is a bit more complete. Like I could spend 5 minutes doing plank because my plank started in a quadruped position. I did cat stretches and cow stretches. I did some bird dog, I did some knee hovers, I walked the plank, I did leg lifts in plank, I did body saw in plank, I did shoulder taps in plank. It feels a lot more intentional. You spend a lot more time doing exercises versus transitioning between exercises, which is really nice. And it provides those baby steps of challenge to the people in your class. And then looping it back to that enhanced expectancy of success bit, when you start with a simple thing, people get a dopamine hit when they do well in class. We know this because people smile when you compliment them, or you say that their form's looking good, or you notice that they're using a heavier weight, or they're trying something on different springs, or an exercise they were really struggling with, they're getting better at. Like, we feel good when we do well. So starting in a place where everyone does well, then you can sneak in challenges, and the people in your class will be much more willing to try because they're already like in a good, positive space and feeling good about their ability and what they're able to do. In addition, the teaching that you do is a lot easier because you're not teaching everything all at once. Like, take an exercise like coordination on the reformer, for example. There are so many steps that happen in the exercise. If you are teaching that exercise to a class and they don't already know what coordination is, like you're really teaching them what it is, if you give them all 5 steps all at once, it can feel overwhelming. And then it's like, are they not successful because they don't have a great memory? They just forgot what comes next in this process of this exercise. Whereas if you took coordination, which is a complex exercise, and then make it really simple to start. We're doing a tricep press only, head down. And then we add in the chest lift with the tricep press. And then we add extending the legs and the arms together all at once, and then they come back together. Everything out, everything in. Then we add, can you hold with everything out? Can the legs do the splits? Can you bend the knees first? Can you bend the elbows second? And then you've created those stepping stones for a very challenging exercise from a complexity standpoint, giving those baby steps of just the tricep press, then the chest lift, then adding the legs, then adding the split with the legs, then adding the syncopated knee return, elbow bend. By teaching that just one thing at a time, it's also easier for you as a teacher. This is the way that I teach my classes. And I never think of an exercise as an island, but it's always an interconnected series of exercises that all go together and all build on each other. Any of those connections we can make, I think that that's meaningful to me as an instructor. I love that stuff and I'm really passionate about it. And I think it can also be really meaningful to our clients because they can kind of see the path to get where they want to go, even if they can't quite get there yet. They know where they're going. As always, a huge thank you to all my supporters on Buy Me a Coffee who already knew about this upcoming workshop because Buy Me a Coffee members always get first look and first dibs to sign up. I'm looking forward to this month's coffee chats and to seeing you in the workshop on November 15th. Check out the details in the show notes, and I hope you have a great week. The adventure continues until next time.